Maryland football lands a crystal ball for five-star Immanuel Iheanacho.
You are Locked On Terps, your daily podcast on the Maryland Terps, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, everyone? I'm Tre Moore, host of Locked On Terps, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So thank you for making us part of your day. And I'm also doing work at Inside Black and Gold. So make sure you guys head over to insideblackandgold.net for all your latest Terps news. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Maryland football receives a humongous crystal ball with five-star Immanuel Iheanacho. It's a tough to pronounce his name a little bit, so I apologize if I am butchering it a little bit. I've tried to listen to everyone pronounce it, but I want to get into this video and talk about a humongous news. I was going to talk about Maryland basketball first, but now we got to talk about this crystal ball that just got placed for Immanuel Iheanacho. This is a big deal. This is some of the biggest recruiting news, some of the biggest Maryland athletic news that we've had in a while. If you guys aren't familiar with the crystal ball, it's something on 247 and on the other recruiting websites. And 247 just put in a prediction for Immanuel Iheanacho by Jeff Erman, of course, the Inside Maryland Sports 247 guy. And they don't do this if they don't actually firmly believe that Maryland's going to land the guy, or that they feel pretty high, that they have a pretty high chance of landing the guy. And Jeff has a pretty good record with his predictions overall, but he feels at a 7 with this one in terms of the confidence level, which is 7, which is high, excuse me. So this is a big deal for Maryland football, for them to get a crystal ball for Immanuel Iheanacho. If it doesn't mean that he feels pretty confident about Maryland, it definitely, or that Maryland's definitely the school, it definitely, I think, means at least that Maryland's definitely making way and is in his top of the schools that he's deciding between. And right now it looks like it's a race between Maryland, obviously Georgia, Oregon, and Penn State, all big-time programs. And obviously you got Georgia, probably the most recognized program right now, probably at the top of the food chain in terms of program. Maybe you could argue Ohio State, but Georgia, of course, is right there with what they've done the last 5 years. Oregon as well had an awesome year. Obviously a blue blood in football right now, obviously doing really good things with Dan Lanning, one of the top teams in the Big Ten. And then you have Penn State, who also had a big time year, did something in the college football playoff, were able to make a little bit of a run there. And so you look at those other schools and you say, what? Maryland is in a battle with these guys? It doesn't totally make sense, to be completely honest. This is why it's a big deal. This isn't like, oh, Maryland's getting a 3-star kid competing with Purdue and Oklahoma State for the guy. Like, these are the blue bloods. These are the big brands. This is a top kid in the nation, and Maryland's right there and has a really good chance at landing him. When people put the crystal ball in, they feel pretty good that this kid is going to Maryland, and that would be huge. And that's why part of why this news is so big, because Maryland has a chance to land its second 5-star in the 2026 rankings. And I think every Maryland fan who envisioned what Maryland recruiting, what they want it to look like, this is what it is. It's Maryland getting the top guys in the DMV. It's Maryland being able to get some of those guys that are really high-end players that are out of the DMV. This is what Maryland recruiting, this is what we kind of envision. It's like, oh, you have 5-star Zion Ely out of St. Francis as the number 2 player in the class. We want Maryland to be in the conversation. We want Maryland to be a huge candidate to land that guy, and that's exactly what happened with 5-star Zion Ely, the number 2 player in 247, arguably the number 1 player in that entire class. And Zion Ely did his thing and committed to Maryland and shut down his recruitment. That's like the dream. That's when you talk about Maryland recruiting, you say there's so many good players in the DMV. If Maryland can maintain their top production in the DMV, they're going to be a really good team. So you get 5-star Zion Ely, and then all of a sudden you're getting a crystal ball for the number 5 ranked player in the 2026 class in Immanuel Iheanacho. That's pretty cool, and that's a pretty big deal for the Terps. This is exactly what we envisioned. Like, that's a dream type of class for Maryland to be able to pick up 2 5-stars potentially. Like, this isn't like 2 4-stars. This is 2 5-stars. Most teams can't get one of those. There's usually what? Right now in 247, they only have 6 5-stars. And so if Maryland's able to get 2 of those, that's a pretty big deal. They'll start handing out other guys 5 stars. Usually there's about 20-ish, can be a little bit more, probably like 22-ish, I would say, usually. And so the fact that the Terps are looking like they might add 2 of those guys and not just 1, that's a huge deal for Maryland football. This is one of the top guys on our board, is the top guy on our board. And the number 1 guy, if Maryland was like, we want to add 1 more guy in our 2026 class, he would be the guy. And he's an extremely high-end type of guy. Of course, he's ranked as a 5-star, like I've been saying, ranked as the number 2 ranked offensive tackle according to 247, 2 in the state of Maryland behind Zion Ely, goes to Georgetown Prep, which is right next to Maryland. Super powerful is the scouting report on him. He's 6 foot, 6'6.5", 350 pounds, but moves extremely well. Like, that's a freak. That's a guy that you want. 6'6" at 345 and moves really well. That's something that can be special. At the college level, I wonder if he stays at tackle, if he's more of a guard at the college level, because I do think that's a possibility that Maryland's like, we're going to kick you out to guard. We think you're better there just because of his size and his power. Right now he's playing tackle in high school, but that might be something later on down the road that Maryland decides that they want to do. And I think this is also huge because offensive line is a premium position. It is really tough. If you don't recruit offensive line at a certain level, it's really hard to be able to get some of these guys and be able to have a good offensive line. I think Maryland fans have seen that. We haven't done a great job at recruiting offensive line, which I don't want to say we haven't done. I thought our 2024 class was really good and deep at the offensive line, but other classes we haven't been that great. And you can make up for lack of receiving talent in a class or lack of running back talent. Like, you can make up for the skilled guys. There's plenty of those guys out there. The offensive line, I've been saying, there's not like a billion of those out there. I like to say there's kind of a surplus of receivers and running backs and the skill guys, even corners. There's kind of a surplus of those types of guys. It's more rare to get high-end offensive linemen. It's harder to get high-end offensive linemen because it just is. There's not as many of those. There's not as many 6'6" human beings on the earth that can move really well at 300 pounds. There's just not a ton of those, which I think is a pretty fair assessment to make. And so when you get the chance to land a kid like Immanuel Iheanacho on the offensive line, you got to take advantage of it, and you got to be able to land a guy like that, because I've been saying that's the difference right now for Maryland football between them and making a big jump. I think it's the offensive line. Last year was terrible. Even when we had the good teams under Talia, I thought the offensive line was still weak, and I thought we could be a really good team potentially in the Big Ten, right behind the big dogs in that next tier down if we had better offensive line play, but we didn't. And getting a guy like Immanuel Iheanacho really sets yourself up for how you've recruited on the offensive line. I thought the 2024 class, there's not like 1 star, but there's like 3 or 4 really solid guys up front that I think are going to be Big Ten type of starters. And then you get Jalen Gilchrist, who's obviously a real one of the most important recruits in our 2025 class. He was a high-end 4-star. And then all of a sudden you're adding Immanuel Iheanacho as well to that group that you're going to have for a couple of years. It's a big deal for the Terps. And just him being a DMV guy and potentially landing another DMV player, I think is a really big deal for Maryland football. And I always talk about it. You already have Zion Ely. If you get Immanuel, Iheanacho too, it becomes a domino effect. I bet you'll watch this 2026 class turn into something special if you're able to start with those two guys. Because I like to say two guys aren't going to make the class. You still got to fill it out. You still got to get other guys. But if you started off like that, you're going to be in a good spot. And that would be really impressive because I thought the 2025 class was Loxley's best class yet. You get a lot of key positions. You get an all-around really good class, I thought, with obviously Malik Washington, Zahir Mathis, late Jalen Gilchrist, Messiah Del Home, some really good players. And then you top their 2026 class with that. That would be something big for the Terps. So I think this is huge news. We're kind of on 5-star watch right now. Obviously, it's not a guarantee that we land them. These other schools, they can definitely pull some strings and make things happen quickly. But if you're able to land the number 5 ranked player in the class, one of the top offensive linemen, one of the top guys in the state of Maryland, that's a huge deal for the Terps. So we'll see exactly what happens with it. I'm excited to see what happens. I'm hoping the crystal ball means something. We'll see exactly what happens. Ehrman put it in as 100%, so he feels pretty good about it, and he's not going to put it in there if he doesn't. But these big dogs are tough to beat out, and we know we've lost some battles to some guys like this, but I want to see what happens with this. And if we pair those together, Zion Ely and edge and Immanuel Iheanacho on the offensive line, that's a really cool start for the 2026 class for Maryland football. Let's get into some Maryland basketball, what we were going to talk about first today before the Immanuel Iheanacho news came out. Maryland basketball gets a huge win. We'll talk about that next. Before Roy, NIL deals were often handled behind closed doors, and fans like you didn't have a clear way to directly support the players you love. Now with Roy, you can make a real impact and feel closer to the athletes representing Maryland. With Roy, you get to choose a player you want to support, decide how much you want to contribute, and get exclusive content straight from the athletes you back. The best part is if your player transfers, you get your money back. So it's a risk-free to show your support and make your voice heard. So support your favorite players directly and help shape the future of Maryland sports. Download the Roy app now from the App Store and start backing Maryland athletes the way they deserve, with transparency, trust, and real impact. This is the future of college sports. Join it now by downloading Roy and supporting your favorite players. So Maryland basketball got a rebound win against Penn State. And let me tell you, that game was not a given win. That game was a tough kind of battle to play out. Maryland was, 4.5 favorites against a not great Penn State team. But when you play a team on the road, if you play a team on the road in the Big Ten, it's going to be tough to win. And I think it's fair to say that this was a tough win to get. I don't want to say there's a continuation of what I watched from the Michigan State game, but it's kind of interesting. I don't think Maryland's playing quite as high of a level as they were, but here's I still feel really good about the Penn State game, and I'll explain kind of why I felt good about it overall and why I thought this game was important. First of all, I want to say this: Derek Queen played phenomenal. He didn't have his best game against Michigan State, but that 23-point win against Penn State might have just given, or 23-point game from Derek Queen might have just locked him up the freshman of the year. He won us that game. He was the best player on the court, which he often is when he steps out on the court. I think not every day it looks like it, but a lot of days it certainly does, and that's what you kind of expect out of a 5-star freshman. Some days he's going to look like the best player in the court, some days he's not, and obviously this Maryland team's really good, so we got a lot of different guys that can do a lot of different things, but man, Derek Queen was special. 23 points against Penn State, 7 of 8 from the free throw line, which you love to see, 8 of 16 from the field, 5 defensive rebounds, 6 rebounds overall, an assist. But what was really awesome was the defensive performance from Reese and Queen. I've said it; they've been really good sometimes this year defensively. Starting with Queen just because we're on him, but 2 blocks and 4 steals. That's a big reason we won. Is what him and Julian Reese were able to do defensively. That's pretty special for Derek Queen for him to be able to get 4 steals and 2 blocks. That's pretty big time from Queen. And then Julian Reese had a bad game offensively, 2 of 10 from the field. Didn't do a lot in terms of the offense, only 4 points. But this is why I love Julian Reese and I love what he can bring to this team, because last year, we needed him to score more than he did. This year, we don't always need him to be a scorer. There's a lot of times and a lot of games that we do, but against Penn State the other night, he didn't have it going. It was like, we don't need you to score, but what a defensive game. 6 steals for Julian Reese. 6. That's pretty amazing. That's his career high, and 3 blocks for Reese. 6 and 3. That's pretty big time. If you add those together, almost had a triple double. If you want to say point, or I guess not, because he didn't have the 10 points, but had 15 rebounds overall as well. Another way he impacted the game, but 6 steals is pretty amazing for a center to have. And then 3 blocks. He's been a really good shot blocker. I think Gillespie, I thought, played a really good game too. It was 19 points for him, 7 assists. I thought he got back on track after the bad game against Michigan State. Didn't play well. I thought he shot the ball really well against Penn State, 3 of 5 from the 3-point arc, 4 of 4 from the free throw line. He's just better than he played. And then Selton Miguel also stepped up, 3 made threes from him, 17 points. And you might look at this game and be like, how did Maryland not win by more? Rodney Rice did struggle, 2 of 13 from the field, but he made one huge when it counted, and that's what's going to happen. But Rodney also had 5 assists, finding out how to make plays in other spots. But that's sometimes what's going to happen. You're not going to have the shot going. He was our best player against Michigan State. He's been our most consistent player probably the last 10 or so games, and Rodney Rice doesn't have it going. And Derek Queen drops 23, Gillespie has 19, Selton Miguel has 17, and we win the game. 1 of 8 from the 3-point line from Rodney Rice. Just wasn't his best game. But this is why I feel good about this team, is because this is exactly why I've said the starting lineup's so special, because it's like, okay, Rodney Rice has been our most consistent player. He's been really good, but he has a terrible shooting day. Can't hit a 3, can't hit a field goal, just has a bad shooting day, which is unlike Rodney Rice so far this year. But it's like, okay, this time Gillespie steps up and drops 19. This time Miguel plays the way that he's capable of, dropping 17. And Derek Queen is the star that we know he can be, dropping 23. That's why I think this team is really good, and I'm pretty confident about us later on in the tournament. But I thought Ace Baldwin for Penn State played well, 18 points for him. I thought the Dunn kid played pretty well. But in terms of bench production, lacking for both teams. No points off the bench for Maryland again. Everybody shot 0 for 1 that got off the bench besides Deshaun Harris-Smith. It's a little concerning. It definitely is. It's definitely something I'm going to keep an eye out on for, but you hope it gets a little bit better. But it was a close game down the stretch. Penn State did some good things. But I thought Maryland shot the ball well from the 3-point arc outside of Rodney Rice. And I thought we did some good things, and I thought Queen was Queen, and sometimes that's what's going to win us games. So that was definitely nice to see Maryland basketball getting a nice little win against Penn State after rebounding from Michigan State. Didn't want to make that 2 losses in a row, and that game was close. Penn State, credit to them. They chipped it up. They played a gritty game, so definitely credit to them, a team that's probably not even going to make the Big Ten tournament. They're pretty bad this year. So they don't have a lot to play for, but still credit to them for playing well and kind of giving us something good to watch. What's next for Maryland basketball? Let's take a look at the week ahead. We'll talk about that next. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. because with FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tips off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets in the same game parlays. I love using FanDuel's live betting features because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. What's next for Maryland basketball? Still a big week ahead for Maryland basketball, obviously. And we're getting down to it now. This year kind of flew by. Great year, but we only got 2 games left. We have a really big one Wednesday, March 5th against Michigan. Obviously, they just took a really bad loss to Illinois. As I'm recording this a day early, you guys don't see this till Monday, but you'll know that I watched a little bit, didn't get to watch a ton of it, but they took a bad loss to Illinois. So this Michigan team's definitely going to be hungry against Maryland on Wednesday, and that's going to be a big game for both teams who are kind of looking to rebound a little bit. Obviously, Maryland just beat Penn State, but the loss to Michigan State, I think Maryland's kind of ready to get their get back for that and get another big win. But I don't know exactly what's going to happen with Maryland and Michigan in terms of their top 25 rankings. Some of you guys will see that before, but it might still be a top 25 game. I don't expect Maryland to fall out of the top 25 from 16, but that's definitely going to be a big-time game and something to watch on Wednesday, 6:30. But I think Maryland could really add another win to really solidify themselves, not as a tournament team. We're a tournament team at this point, and obviously we feel good about that. But I think as a team that wants to be a 4 or 5 seed, I think we want to be somewhere around there instead of a 6 or 7 or even maybe possibly an 8. I think a win against Michigan will really solidify ourselves as that a 4 or 5, maybe a 6, but I feel like it gives us a really good chance at being at a better spot than where we are. So I think this week ahead is really important. And then you get another chance at Northwestern at home in your last game on Saturday this week, or I guess this weekend, which is obviously a big deal. Maryland lost to this Northwestern team before on a buzzer beater, and you get a chance for some revenge. So 2 good games, 2 big games. And then when we look at the Big Ten standings, first place is no longer an option, but you want to keep the top 4 seeds in the Big Ten tournament. Right now there's a 3-way tie for the top 4 seeding in terms of the 3 seed between Wisconsin, Maryland, and Purdue. Purdue beat us. We beat Wisconsin. Wisconsin beat Purdue. So I don't know exactly how that gets decided, but everyone is 12-6 in conference. So we'll see exactly, but that's why you want to keep winning games. Wisconsin and Purdue hopefully will drop one or either or, and you can hopefully win 2 big games so you can keep that top 4 seed in the Big Ten tournament, because you don't want to play an extra game that you don't have to play, because remember, the top 4 seeds in the Big Ten tournament get the bye. So that's why it's extremely important for the Terps to be able to get that bye, because like I said, it's March now. Anything can happen, and you can get an early exit. A team that's not supposed to win wins all the time. A team that's not supposed to shoot the ball well, that shoots 27% from 3, so all of a sudden has a game where they shoot 70% from a 3, and they're in it the whole time, and they win the game late. Stuff like that happens during March, and so the least amount of games you can play is the better in terms of buys and stuff like that. So I think Maryland will definitely be looking at that, and I think that's important for the Terps. But I also think the grand scheme of things, these last 2 games, if I wanted one theme that I want to get going, I really want to see the bench do something, whether it's Gapari, Geronimo, Deshaun, Young, like, I don't know, but something's got to get going on the bench. And I think that's a theme this week. Right before March starts, right before the Big Ten tournament starts, can Maryland's bench give us something to feel decent about going into the tournament, something to feel decent about that they're able to do? I don't know exactly. We'll see exactly what happens. But that's something that you hope Maryland can get better at, that they can kind of fix going into the tournament. But who knows? We'll see exactly what happens. That it's definitely something I'm going to be looking at. But I think Maryland basketball is in a really good spot, and we're getting closer to the tournament. And I think everyone, including me, is excited to see what this team can do down the stretch because we have a ton of talent. We have a ton of guys. But you got to start with this game against Michigan on Wednesday. We'll see where Michigan's ranked after getting tossed around by Illinois. They'll definitely want to rebound, so it definitely will be a big game for the Terps. That's all we have for today. Thank you guys for listening to Locked on Terps. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. We're here every day talking Maryland football and basketball, so thank you guys for listening to Locked on Terps.